Heya, Disaster Area here again. And yeah, back with another video. This one required a fair bit more work than the other ones since I had to build several tools, which is what this video is all about. Some of you may be aware, if I've messaged you at some point or something like that, that I've been building some team building tools for a number of tiers. These are built in Google Sheets. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. I'm just dumb. You already knew that. Uh, yeah, I built some team building tools in Google Sheets. I'll have a link in the description to a document that lists all of the tools when they were last updated. Since I've built these for a few different tiers. Currently, as I'm doing this video, it's Advanced OU, DPP Ubers, OU, and LC. And there's also an old version for RBY and U. And there may be more coming in the future, who knows? But basically, what this tool is, and it's inspired by Vapakuno's idea of synergy score, which we'll get into in a bit, which basically is a measure of how synergistic two Pokemon are, and I wanted to apply that in the sense that if you have like a bunch of data, say from like tournaments, which is what we've done here, and you plug in a list of like 1 to 5 Pokemon, can you use those scores to figure out what the remaining Pokemon could or should be? So the way I approached it was initially I was just averaging together the 5 scores, putting in like a quite low value if the 2 Pokemon had never been used together as well. Technically, it should be negative infinity, but that's not useful. So it's a low value. It varies by sheet actually, but again, I can sort of get into that later, maybe on like the exact sort of implementation. But yeah, initially when I just looked at the synergy scores alone, that didn't give the greatest results, but I've also applied usage, and using these two things together in a weighted way, which I sort of did through trial and error more than some mathematical certainty that was the exact right way to go. It's a pretty good tool. Let me just open things up a bit. This is what the tool looks like. It varies by generation. Obviously, they'll look the same, but the actual results, of course, will be different because different tiers, different data, and so on. But basically, what you do is you select from a drop down here of all the Pokemon that are in the data set. You can also press delete or backspace to remove one of these and see what happens, see how that changes the score. See, it takes a little time to load. Yeah, that's how you use it in the simplest sense. Is you there's 2 different contexts of when you might want to use this tool. One is when you were team building, which was my original conception was I've got this team and I'm not sure exactly sort of what to put in the last slot, and then it gives like a list of suggestions that you can it can give sort of a hint as to what the team is missing, perhaps. Some of them you may be able to throw away out of hand, be like, actually, no, that's not a good suggestion. And other ones may be a bit more insightful. But the other thing it's useful for is in battle. You'll notice like all of the tiers that I've done this for are no preview tiers, so generations 4 and before that. When the opponent's full team isn't revealed at the start of the game. So when the opponent's team is partially revealed, this essentially provides an educated guess of what the last Pokemon may be. Sometimes it will be inferior to your own knowledge. It depends a bit on like what's revealed. Like if you're playing DPUbers and you've seen a Salamence and not a Rayquaza, probably going to be a Rayquaza last. Kind of how it goes. But the tool probably will suggest Rayquaza, but it may not be like massively high on it. This isn't like DPP Ubers. So sometimes your knowledge will be better, but it depends a bit your own experience and so on. But it's a tool. It's meant to make things a little bit easier for figuring out stuff in battle, figuring out what your opponent's using. Um, there's obviously, especially in a generation like Gen 4, that is quite a significant skill to have competitively, is deducing your opponent's team. Especially in like such fast-paced metagames, which DPP has quite a few of, then knowing what your opponent's loss will be can be pretty crucial. Um, yeah. So that's the basics of like what you would use the tool for. Um, there are other ways of using it. Um, yeah, let me just make a note on that. Beyond this tool itself, you'll see that there's a bunch of different tabs here. There's sort of how to use, which have got all sorts of comments, got where the synergy score idea came from, which is something I'll get into the details of how this actually works in a little bit as well. I've got credits and the data sources. You can see all tournaments I've used and how many teams are included in that. But there's also the usage, B, the synergy scores. I need these for the tool to work, but I thought, well, why don't I make it visible for everyone as well? So you can see this is just the usage of what was in the data. It wasn't from like any one tournament, and it bearing in mind that I've excluded where teams have unrevealed Pokemon. If a team didn't have like in DVPLC, if Gligar and Munchlax aren't at 100%, it's because people weren't using them at 100% rate. It's not because of unrevealed Gligars and Munchlaxes, for example. But yeah, obviously there's probably some bias inherent in the fact that I decided not to include teams where only only part of the team was revealed. But it's interesting. The ADVOU one ended up being quite curious, actually. If I pull that up, after Tyranitar, which had a sky high 72% usage, which is to be expected, it was pleasantly intrigued, I guess might be a way of putting it. The fact that 4 Pokemon then have, within about a percentage point, 37% usage, which was interesting to me. Just seeing what people have used, you can see here what the sources are. Pretty legit tournaments. Much as I don't like Calliope that tournament does have, for the most part, some pretty great players, and it's certainly a good place to get data for this kind of tool. But yeah, the other thing, of course, is you can see the synergy scores. There's some certain weird things always pop to the top in these. If I pull through, DPP Uber's had some interesting examples. The sort of stuff that pops to the top is often a case of somebody has run like a very specific team, like once, with a couple Pokemon that nobody else has used, and because of that, it gives those Pokemon extremely high scores together. So here, like Omastar and Toxicroak was because in BKC's Invitational tournament, which, hey, he's been doing an awesome job with, by the way. Kevin, loved the content if you see this. August, I think it was, brought a team which had Omastar and Toxicroak, and nobody else has used either Pokemon the entire tournament. So if you plug in one or other of those Pokemon, the other one will pop out as being like a really strong possibility, as it should really. So there's some sort of weird stuff that sort of pops up higher up. But yeah, just in general, there's like a lot of interesting sort of things you can analyze based on this. You can see that the baton pass abuse data, I didn't clear that out. I didn't really do much to manipulate the data exactly. I just kind of took it as is. But yeah, there's some interesting options down here at the bottom end of these. These are instances where there's these really common Pokemon like Blissey or whatever, and the 2 common Pokemon are used a lot, but almost never together, but sometimes. And some of these cores you do see, but just not very often. Like Zapdos and Moltres, there is a well-known sort of double bird core in ADVOU. Um, One of the most interesting ones I saw was this one, Swampert and Suicune together. Now the thing is, those two Pokemon are both extremely common in ADVOU, very high usage. Nothing surprising about that. These days, you don't ever really see them together. But a couple years ago, it was actually a pretty common choice. I wouldn't say like massively common, but in tournaments, a few players were using that core because it was a good like anti-meta pick for sort of the aggressive physical spam that was going around at the time. So there's interesting stories I think behind some of these pairings, and also as Watermess was saying when I discussed it with him on Discord, he sort of says that these can be used as like a place to get interesting team building ideas. Like these underused cores that could work but are rarely seen. So yeah, there's other ways of using the tool beyond the actual tool itself, which is something I just sort of wanted to touch on as well. So that's sort of the main stuff. I kind of want to touch on the maths behind this now for those of you who are interested. Discuss some of the flaws and give credit. So I might as well give the credits first. The two biggest shout outs are to Vapicuno and PK Leech. Vapicuno, of course, introduced the concept of the synergy score. In all of these, in the how to use section, you can find a link to his threads. He did some awesome data work, and the synergy score was only a part of it. And I recommend anyone with just an interest in data or ADV or just Pokemon is really worth a read. But yeah, a massive shout out to him for giving, I don't know, the extent to which he came up with that concept or just realized the applicability of it to Pokemon. But it's awesome, and it made this possible. PK Leech as well deserves a massive shout out because he wrote code in Python. Python. Going a bit scone here. He wrote code in Python, which he wrote a few different pieces. One was able to pull the Pokemon data directly from replays, putting in like a list of replays and doing that, which was super useful. And the other thing was pulling replays from Smogon threads. You would choose the metagame once you put in the thread, it'll spit out the replays. And he also had one which he didn't share with me, but he's used to do similar things from Discord chats, which is pretty cool. As he's Italian, it's okay to say that he writes a spaghetti code, as he says. So, yeah. I'm sure because he's Italian, he can get away with it, can't he? Yeah, so massive shout out to those. There's also a few other people who like pulled together like lists of replays or whatever, and they're shouted out in the individual credits on each of these tools. But yeah, I want to go into the maths. How the heck does the synergy score work? So I've basically put this equation here for the synergy score. The top is sort of like the mathematical interpretation in terms of probabilities. And then the bottom bit is what that means in terms of actual Pokemon usage. Basically, sort of like what this basically gets at is comparing how common these Pokemon are together on a team compared to if team building were random. So like, say that Swampert's used at 20%, and then Blissey is used at 10%. They're not realistic numbers, but if team building were random, you'd expect, I don't know, 0.02, like 2% of teams to have both of them. But if it's higher than that, then the PXY will be, the teams with X and Y will be greater than like 2% or whatever it is. Whereas If it's less than that, if they're really not seen together often, it'll be like less than 2%. And with the score, because we're taking a logarithm of that, if it's above 0, that means that they're used together more than if team building were random. If it's negative, it means they're used together less than if team building were random. And as you can see here, if there's no teams with both Pokemon used, then you've got a log of 0, which tends to negative infinity. As I said here, that's not really practical, because we don't have like perfect data. You don't have every game ever played or that ever will be played or anything like that. For the sake of the tool, we just stick in a variable that goes when the two Pokemon have never been seen together. Particularly for like low usage Pokemon, like I don't know, like the Omastar and Toxicroak and DPP Ubers. Like if they've never been used together, then there's not going to be much stuff that has like great synergy with both. Well, yeah. Ignore the bit of a tangent. But yeah, just it's practical. What I use is I take the minimum score of any pairing and then I multiply it by 1.5. So sometimes it's about like -4.5. Sometimes it's as low as like -7, -8. It depends on the tier, but it's sort of a placeholder value anyway, and it probably doesn't really affect things. Probably be an unusual situation where a Pokemon that's not been used as one of the 5 Pokemon you've selected would still like have high synergy with the team. So yeah, that's the maths behind it. Another thing you'll sort of notice is it doesn't matter. There's no order to it. So as I was sort of saying before, with like Rayquaza and Salamence, there's a fixed score between the two. It's not you see Rayquaza and then there's X% of seeing Salamence, versus you see Salamence and there's Y% of seeing Rayquaza, which we could deduce, but that's just not how this tool works. That's not how I decided to go with it. But maybe you could code up something to work in that way. I'm not sure how you do it exactly, but yeah, it sounds like perfectly plausible to me. But yeah, I like this approach. I wanted to experiment with it, see what happened. So let me know in the comments if you find the tool useful, if you like the tools. Just, give me a comment, like, subscribe, message me on Discord, like whatever you want to do. Always appreciate it. It's cool when you make something and other people like it. Yeah. Maybe sort of discuss the other flaws as well. Like some Pokemon won't be included due to limited data. For all of the ones besides the RBYNU one, they've got at least 300 plus teams, so it's a pretty decent data size. And for most Pokemon that you'll be dealing with, this should be pretty good. The other thing is exercise your own judgment, use with caution. It's in no way a prediction. It's just sort of a very well educated guess, but it's not based on anything like explicit about the Pokemon. It's not like, oh, this team doesn't have a spiker, there must be a Forretress, or anything like that. It doesn't do anything explicit like that. It's just based on the data. It's just based on statistics only. The other thing is just because you know your opponent's team or can figure it out doesn't necessarily put you in a winning position. But it can be it is an important skill in some metagames. If you know your opponent's last, then you may be able to play a bit differently around that fact. You may value your Pokemon differently. If there's like 3 or 4 Pokemon left either side, then those sorts of decisions can matter. So yeah, that's Oh, and also just want to mention this is like some of the stuff is like listed in the intro of the how to use sections of these tools, but the choice of lead also doesn't impact the result. It doesn't take that into account. I know that there's probably ways you could do better if you did include that in some way. But ultimately, this doesn't take into account that piece of information. So yeah, I also don't include sets, which is different from how Vapikun did it, where he did one way or another sort of group Pokemon by set as well. There's another approach that you could take, but just looking at the Pokemon made this so much simpler to make and still pretty useful. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you appreciate using the tools, and I hope that it helps you play better, build better, whatever it does for you, inspire you to build more teams. But thank you if you've watched all the way. Like, subscribe, comment, anything. Peace out.